Right now, millions of people are trying to eat like a caveman, lean meat, wild plants, no processed food. It's marketed as the diet our bodies were built for, the one that made our ancestors strong, lean, and resilient. But 49,000 years ago, across parts of Europe, Neanderthals were living on similar kinds of wild, hunted, and foraged food, the same category of diet the modern paleo movement claims to recreate. And it didn't guarantee their survival. Within a few thousand years, that population disappeared as a distinct human lineage, not erased without a trace, but reduced to fragments, scattered bones, and small pieces of their DNA still carried inside people alive today. Which raises an uncomfortable question for anyone who believes the ancient diet is the secret to thriving. If eating like our ancestors was the key to survival, why didn't it guarantee survival for the people who had lived that way for thousands of generations? To understand what happened, you have to understand something most people get wrong about calories. A calorie isn't just a unit on a nutrition label, it's a currency. Every living body runs on a strict energy budget, and the amount you need just to stay alive before you've even moved a muscle is called your basal metabolic rate. If you consistently spend more energy than you take in, your body has to draw on its own reserves. And there's a limit to how long that trade-off can last. When scientists began comparing the skeletons of Neanderthals to early modern humans living in the same broad environments, they found something that looked at first like an advantage. Neanderthal bones tended to be shorter, thicker, and denser, the build of a body engineered for raw power. Their leg proportions, particularly the relationship between the lower leg and the thigh, hint at a physique suited to short, powerful movement rather than long-distance endurance, though researchers are still debating exactly how that translated into daily life. On paper, that kind of strength should have been an advantage. But biology rarely rewards strength without asking what it costs, and that powerful build came with a cost, one that may have mattered more than anyone expected, so researchers tried to put a number on that cost. Estimates based on Neanderthal body size, muscle mass, and activity suggest that they may have had substantially higher daily energy demands than similarly sized modern humans. Picture what that means over an entire lifetime. More energy required just to maintain the body. Multiply that across a group, across every season, across generations, and the difference stops sounding small. It becomes a higher energetic cost built directly into the body. Now picture the moment that cost may have mattered most. Around 45,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began entering parts of Europe where Neanderthal populations had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. In some of the same landscapes, both populations hunted animals and relied on wild resources. And in that kind of environment, even a small difference in daily energy needs could matter. It could mean the difference between a population that can absorb a bad season and one that has less room for error. But here's where the story gets more complicated than a simple contest over who needed less food. Around the same period, parts of Europe experienced major climatic instability. Colder and drier phases could make hunting harder, foraging less predictable, and every calorie more expensive to find. Neanderthals had survived climatic shifts before. For hundreds of thousands of years, they had adapted to changing environments. What was different now was that another human population was entering the same landscapes, potentially competing for some of the same shrinking resources. In northern Spain, inside a cave system that had preserved Neanderthal remains for tens of thousands of years, researchers uncovered the bones of several individuals, adults, adolescents, and children who were closely related. At first, the remains looked like the aftermath of some ancient catastrophe. But the closer scientists examined the bones, the more unsettling the picture became. Their teeth told the first part of the story. Faint defects in the enamel, marks that can form when the body experiences severe physiological or nutritional stress during childhood, appeared in several individuals. They didn't prove starvation, but they suggested that some of these Neanderthals had experienced repeated periods of hardship while they were growing. And then came the second part of the story, cut marks. Deliberate marks made by stone tools crossed some of the bones. Their location and pattern suggested that the bodies had been intentionally processed after death. Researchers have interpreted this evidence as consistent with cannibalism, although exactly what happened inside the cave remains unknown. El Sidron is not the only European Neanderthal site where researchers have reported evidence of deliberate processing of human remains. But that doesn't mean cannibalism was a normal part of Neanderthal life. It means that, in at least some places and at some moments, Neanderthals experienced conditions severe enough to leave behind disturbing traces. And there's an important detail. This happened before Homo sapiens became established across much of Europe. So whatever pressures eventually contributed to Neanderthal disappearance, competition with us cannot explain everything. Their world was already changing, and sometimes the land itself simply stopped being enough. So what actually happened to the Neanderthals? The honest answer is that no single explanation fully accounts for it. Their disappearance wasn't one event. It was likely a convergence of several pressures arriving at once. A body with high energetic demands, a climate that repeatedly changed the landscapes they depended on, and eventually another human population entering some of the same regions, potentially competing for resources at the worst possible time. None of those pressures alone had to be fatal. Together, they may have been. And that's what makes this story different from the one people usually tell about the paleo diet. The wild, unprocessed way of eating that modern paleo culture associates with strength and resilience was never a guarantee of survival. It was simply one way of living in a particular environment. Neanderthals didn't disappear because they ate the wrong foods. They may have disappeared because they ran out of margin. Though in a world that stopped giving them enough room to recover, maybe that's the real lesson buried in 50,000-year-old bones. Survival was never just about what you ate. It was about how much room you had to adapt when everything went wrong. Our lineage survived, theirs didn't, and we still don't fully know why. If stories like this, the quiet, complicated reasons an entire branch of humanity disappeared, are the kind of mystery that stays with you, subscribe. There's more of this history still waiting to be uncovered.